In a 10-day model building challenge, I tried to finish the Kovozávody Prostějov F-6 by the deadline. All I bought was a copper pitot tube and machine gun from Polish master. The F-6 is actually the name of the export version of the Chinese clone of the Soviet MiG-19, the J-6. In this video, I'm going to use a black underlay instead of the white one I used before. In a comment, you can tell me if this makes it easier to see what I'm doing. What bothers me the most is that the KP does not count the parts on the molding frame. So you have to keep looking at the front of the manual, and it's not very practical. The kit consists of 110 parts. It contains 2 gray and 1 transparent frame. The canopy and the windscreen are made of one piece, slightly distorted. An even bigger problem is that it shows a major scratch or molding defect. To remove this, I rubbed it with Tamiya polishing paste. The 3 types of paste are applied one after the other, in the order specified, and rubbed over the surface. First, the red-capped coarse, then the blue-capped fine, and finally, the white-capped finish tube should be used to apply the polish. If you do it right, the scratch will disappear in the end. The next step was to mask the canopy with Tamiya masking tape. Do not press the blade too hard during this operation. After all, it is only the masking tape that needs to be cut, not the whole canopy. It is always a good idea to use a new blade that is still perfectly sharp. To remove micro scratches, I used AK Gauzy Agent Liquid. Some people say it's essentially just floor polish. I don't know if it is, but it makes transparent surfaces look much nicer. I continued the build by gluing the canopy and wings together. There is nothing on the wings to help the fit. So much for the first day of the 10-day challenge. By the next day, the glue on the wings was completely dry, so I cut off the machine guns that were poured on, drilled a hole in their place, and replaced them with copper parts. I painted the cockpit bluish-gray. I mixed the 2 colors until they were as similar as possible to the pre-painted dashboard color. I sprayed the cabin with this bluish-gray paint, as well as the nose and main landing gear bays and the inside of the doors, according to the KP instructions. It later turned out that this was a mistake, as they were gray. I put a lead weight in the nose of the aircraft and sprayed the painted cabin with oil paint to imitate the dirt that had accumulated. I started gluing the fuselage halves from the back. Here they fit together quite well. On the nose section, however, there is a gap of about 1 millimeter, which I filled with styrene. If I had let the same amount out of the cockpit, it would probably have been possible to fit it together. But then it wouldn't have given out the intake arch, and that would have needed to be polished. The fitting of the two external tanks that hang under the wings also required some filling and sanding, after which the panel lines had to be scratched back. I then fixed the other pieces of the cockpit in place. Almost all. Due to the canopy, the wings cannot be put in place. They have to be cut out. Unfortunately, the wings still don't fit perfectly to the fuselage, so I had to use a fibre over a flame. Sometimes there is such a gap at the joints of the model that it is practical to insert some plastic into the gap. The cheapest way to do this is to use fibre drawn from a piece of molding frame over a flame. Another advantage is that it does not shrink like putty. Of course, you will need putty to completely eliminate the gap, but much less. To make the drawn fibre, cut out a roughly straight piece of the model's molding frame, at least 6 to 8 centimeters long. This should be annealed over a flame and then stretched. As soon as you feel the plastic soften, you must remove it from the flame, or it will tear or catch fire. If you stretch the soft plastic firmly and vigorously, you will get a thin fibre. And if you pull more slowly, you'll get a thicker drawn fibre. The fibre cools and hardens in a few seconds. During this time, you need to keep it taut to keep it straight. Cut off the excess, and you can use it. The drawn fibre should be placed in the gap, and then well coated with an acetone-based product such as Tamiya Extra Thin Cement or airbrush cleaner. The acetone dissolves the plastic, causing the stretched fibre to soften and almost fuse to the model. Use tweezers or another tool to push it into the gap until it is soft. Allow to set, then remove the excess. You need to use a lot of glue when inserting the drawn fibre, and be very careful not to accidentally touch it. If you do, your fingerprints will remain in the material of the model and can only be removed by sanding after drying. Any excess glue on the model will evaporate quickly. Once the fibre that is glued into the gap has set and you have removed the excess, it is worth sanding once. Then use a conventional filler, modeling putty, to completely fill the remaining gap, then sand and prime the surface. This will completely eliminate any major joint gaps. I painted the engines and the exhaust metallic before gluing them to the fuselage. KP presents us with many excellent opportunities to improve our filler grinder skills. The fit of the exhaust nozzles is just that. The fit of the stabilizers also needs to be filled. After fixing the full chord boundary layer fence, I glued the canopy in place. You will see later why this was premature. I thinned Tamiya putty with leveling thinner to cover small gaps. The excess putty can be wiped off with a cotton swab dipped in thinner. As you can see, this part is supposed to be in there, inside the canopy. Since I missed it, I had to break the glue and seal and redo it. While the glue was drying, I drilled out and fitted the auxiliary intakes for the engine. I used a water-based putty to reseal the canopy. The procedure was the same. I wiped off the excess filler with a wet cotton swab. Some of the panel lines were missing due to sanding, and I had to scratch them back. I made a template from dymo tape to scratch back the round covers, as I couldn't get the metal template close enough. Even though this bluish-gray color looks good, I still have to paint it gray. On the Pakistani aircraft, only the cockpit was this color. The inside of the landing gear was gray. I sprayed the underside of the aircraft in a lightly lit Mr. Hobby H308 light gray. After studying the photos, it became clear that the wheels are not gray, but typical Russian green. To mask the bottom color, I used blue tack clay and masking tape. I sprayed the first masking color Mr. Hobby H307 gray. On Pakistani planes, the camouflage-colored external tanks with red painted noses and no red paint, and the natural metallic-colored tanks appear completely randomly. Since the latter adds a little variety to the appearance of the aircraft, I opted for it. While that was drying, I masked out the light gray camouflage. KP recommends Mr. Hobby H305 for the dark camo, but it's too gray. So I mixed in several blues, greens, reds, and whites. I don't know the exact proportions, but it's pretty close to the Pakistani bluish gray. On day 8, the aircraft was weathered with oil paints. I used a bluish-gray oil paint mixed with brown on the edges of the panels. After letting it sit for about half an hour, I rubbed off the excess with the back of a sanding sponge and a dry cotton swab. Where I couldn't touch, I used a brush dipped in white spirit to wipe back the oil paint. That almost took the day, but in the evening I sprayed the center of the panels with a white faded mix of the base color, then blurred the whole thing to bring the contrast back. If you like the way I work, you can visit the modelbuilder.art website and go to the contact menu. Tell me what kind of model you want, and I will be happy to build it for you. I started the second to last day with varnishing. I coated the model with Mr. Color GX 100 gloss varnish to protect the oil paint and make it easier to apply the decals. This varnish needs 2 to 3 hours to dry well enough to cure and be ready to work on. The optimum would, of course, be 48 hours rest, but that's not a given at the moment. I put the decals on it in the afternoon. They are not very grateful because they are quite fragile. I accidentally tore one of them, and the print quality is not the best. After the decals had dried, I mixed some Tamiya enamel paints with a diluted dark gray and added a little brown. I used this to wash the panel lines. On the last day, I glued on the landing gear doors, the antenna, and the pitot tube, then sprayed the model with matte varnish. I finally got the mask off the canopy and imitated some metallic chipping on the wing inlets and the nose of the external tanks. Lastly, the master 3D printed machine guns were put in place. The model was finally completed after 55 hours of work in the last minutes of the 10-day challenge. Thank you for watching this video. If you would like me to build for you a model like this, or similar, you can use the modelbuilder.art link in the description. दुश्मन बया संगत बस वादा बहारानी मर्दम वतारानी परजा मजानी